Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee and Macaron's Sketchy Shop.
Today, we will be selling you illegal blankets as we discuss what if blankets were illegal, the history of genetic engineering, different kinds of planners, and our awesome undisclosed debate.
Okay, first, let us pause the podcast to count our Sketchy Shop income.
A few moments later.
Okay, let's discuss our illegal blanket profits by posing the question, what if blankets were illegal?
I have a few questions about this. What the heck were you doing when you came up with this question?
That's a good question, but that is a business secret. I can't tell you.
Not even to your business partner.
Wait.
Oh, I feel betrayed.
Alternate title of this episode: Coffee Betrays Macaron, Top 10 Anime Betrayals.
Oh my god. No. Oh my gosh. But other questions that would be posed if blankets were illegal. Would we use other things to cover ourselves when it's cold? Because I'm pretty sure, like, in early human times, they probably used some form of blankets. So, like, because they didn't have heaters. I mean, in today's world, I guess we could live without blankets. It's just comforting to know that we have something protecting us. It's like I think it's an inherent thing that we have, or maybe that we develop because we were wrapped in blankets when we were a child. But I guess like we would just have to everyone would have to have a heater in their house to just heat them up in the perfect temperature. But then the problem that comes is that many people in the house have different like preferences. So at least with blankets, one person can have like 5 on them and one person can have 0 if they want to. But heater is universal in the household,
Oh, that's very interesting. Like, then you would have to invent some intricate heating system to warm up everybody's room a different way. And how would you find out what temperature you need the heater to be on? Because I feel like you can't just feel oh, my internal homeostasis. Why don't you tell me what body temperature you want?
Wait, but doesn't everyone have like a temperature they just generally like at least like a range? Because I know I think you can find it really easily. Because if you just experiment a little bit, like I know my household, we generally like the temperature to be in between 70 to 73.
Oh, yeah, but I feel like this law is very difficult to find loopholes with. Because according to Google, the definition of a blanket is a large piece of woolen or similar material used as a bed covering or other covering for warmth. So anything that you use as a covering for warmth would count as a blanket. So you can't take a piece, a layer of dirt and cover yourself and be like, haha, I'm not being illegal. Well, no, you are, because you're using that dirt to cover yourself for warmth. And the whole point, actually, no, maybe you can get around it if you said you were covering yourself for comfort.
But warmth is kind of comfort. It's a form of comfort. If the government makes blankets illegal, they basically want you to use a synthetic form of heat, because basically blankets are the only natural form of giving your body heat, unless you're penguins and you're just like huddling all close to each other, in these giant herds, which I guess we would do, but that's just unproductive. So we won't be productive as a society if we were all just huddling in Times Square in New York in the freezing cold winter, So I guess the only circumstance the government might want to ban blankets is if they really want you to use heaters for some reason.
Yeah, I think it would be really difficult if blankets were illegal because sometimes you use blankets like when you're on the go, like maybe you're on a really long train ride or on the airplane. You know, if you're on the airplane, what are you gonna use as a blanket? Wait, you can't like just huddle with people like you said on the airplane. That's gonna be a mess.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you just wear a lot of clothes.
I have a question though. Would really warm clothing count as blankets? Because technically the blanket definition is like something that wraps, like a covering that keeps you warm, right?
Well, you wear clothes, so I don't think that would count. I think if you wore a bunch of clothes, you could get around this. Because, like, clothes and blankets are clearly separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't wear clothes that look like blankets, and you won't get arrested.
Yeah, because clothes are basically the definition of clothes is items worn to cover the body, whereas blanket, as Coffee said earlier, what blankets are,
I feel like this law would also give the government a very hard time because I feel like people would want blankets and we'd be like, illegally acquiring blankets. We had a flourishing black market.
I mean, how can they check in every person's house if they have because blankets are quite easy to make. You can literally just buy a giant piece of fabric, cut it out. There you go.
Yeah, I feel like this law would be the kind of law that's like a failing law. Like no one's actually gonna follow it. Like seriously. Like people might seem like they're doing it like on the outside. Like, oh, I just have some fabric in my house for like, knitting my granddaughter's sweater. But no, it's my blanket. But no, we don't call it a blanket. We call it a warm covering.
Oh my gosh. Scandalous. There's actually a town in Florida that banned blankets for homeless people. So homeless people can't have blankets.
What?
Like, and it's insane. So there's technically actually a blanket ban for a specific targeted group in a town in Florida.
That's kind of dumb. Like,
Right? I don't
what?
understand the reasoning behind this, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, if you don't give them blankets, then do you want to deal with the dead bodies on the street when
Oh
like they
gosh.
freeze to death or something? Actually, maybe it's not that cold in Florida.
No, I mean you still need blankets in the night.
Oh, really?
Because don't
I've
you
never
don't you
been there.
have like don't you wear blankets in the summer? Like just like cover yourself in the summer too?
Oh, in the summer, I only wear blankets because my parents say that if I don't cover my stomach with the blanket, then I'll catch a cold and I'll get sick. And so I just use it to cover my stomach. I feel like that's the weirdest logic ever, but try it.
Interesting. That's interesting logic. Blankets, I feel like it's just for me, it's more of a comforting thing that I use.
Yeah.
Because in the summer I don't really need it, but I'll often just put a really, really thin blanket on myself. Especially in India. It's like it's incredibly hot, right? That's when I would use it.
Do you think that like little children, like as young as toddlers, would be going to court just because they were cold and wanted something to cover themselves, and they accidentally said the illegal word blanket
Oh my god.
on the street in a store and be like, "Mommy, I'm cold. I want a blanket."
Would they know what
Arrested.
kids wouldn't know illegal words unless their parents told it to them. So
Wow. Oh, arrest your whole family.
oh my god. Anyway, now moving on into a less illegal territory, let us talk about the history of genetic engineering. And it's very, very important in today's day and time, especially after like one of the biggest revelations in the field of genetics has been made. The whole CRISPR-Cas9 enzyme system, it's revolutionary, and we have had lots of tools to edit genes before, but none that was basically this amazing and this good and so effective, and yeah, and it's so easy too. People are just editing genes. It's insane.
Genetic engineering is like a fairly recent thing. Like I think it started around the 1970s when there was this scientist that first accomplished creating recombinant DNA with more than one species, and like recombinant DNA is like taking DNA molecules from two different species and then inserting them into a host organism to create a new combination of DNA. Basically, the point of recombinant DNA is to like cut and paste together DNA sequences of interest for studying. And like this experiment showed that any two DNA molecules could be covalently joined together, even if they weren't like originally supposed to be in like the same cell.
Yeah. By the way, did you say who discovered recombinant DNA?
I'm not sure if this person discovered it.
It was it was Herbert Boyer and Stanley Norman Cohen, who
But
were
like
quite mad that they weren't really able to patent their discovery, because at the time patenting biological phenomenon was not really thought of as a thing, and for a while,
but like there were two major events before the 1960s that like opened the door for genetic engineering, but like they weren't actually like considered genetic engineering. It was like the discovery of DNA structure in 1953. Like you can't genetic engineer if you don't know what the genes are.
I
And
don't know what to genetically engineer in the first place,
exactly. So that was in 1953. And then in 1958, a scientist named Arthur Comberg made DNA in a test tube for the first time, which was probably pretty revolutionary because DNA is such a complex molecule.
Yeah. DNA is a rock star, guys. Do not underestimate DNA.
DNA makes everything inside of you possible.
Yeah. So
Actually,
let's talk about some different tools that people discovered in the past 50-ish years. So one of them, so the basis of gene editing basically relies on initiating a break in the DNA on a chromosomal site to basically trigger one, and a double strand break is abbreviated to DSB. And so the introduction of one of these DSBs will initiate different pathways. I won't get into the sciencey stuff of it because the science is kind of complicated in this part, but there were a lot of tools, including ZFNs and talons. Talons is TALENs. It's basically used protein power. It looked at protein engineering to create these tools to edit DNA, and it basically combined a lot of different biological molecules. Let's just leave it there. And ZFNs and talons were really thought of to be the main powers for genetic engineering until even 2013, 2012, 2013. until the breakthrough discovery of CRISPR-Cas9 and the CRISPR-Cas9 enzyme. And I don't think we need to get into the super sciencey details of it because it's kind of a lot. But basically, CRISPR-Cas9 basically uses these tools to splice DNA at specific points and replace genes. It was discovered by this Lithuanian, I think this researcher in a different country. I forgot the country. I'm so sorry. But this is how estimated, not underappreciated, that's the word, how underappreciated this guy is. He discovered CRISPR, but he didn't really take it that far, and he had a lot of issues with publishing. But then eventually he was finally noticed by some people. Oh my god, this just shows how much of a bad reader I am when I actually read these things. I don't really remember too much, but I remember some things. But fast forward a few years, eventually CRISPR caught on to UC Berkeley, and Jennifer Doudna she basically was revolutionary in the field of RNA. She knew a lot about it, and RNA interference was really thought of to be another powerful tool for gene editing one day. But people were kind of drifting away from that as CRISPR was discovered, and she, along with Emmanuel Charpentier, who was, I think, from a certain country in Europe, I forgot, but she was a European scientist, and she had also shown interest in CRISPR. And they had actually teamed up with some of Doudna's and Charpentier's postdoctoral students, and they had created a team to start cracking the basis of CRISPR and find how the enzymes work and how CRRNA and transcriptor RNA, like all of them work together to edit and splice DNA, but they only figured out how it works with bacterial defense, like actions. I don't really know how to describe this. Like bacterial defense mechanisms. That's the word. So they figured out how bacteria can defend themselves from viruses, and they realized that this is a super powerful tool. And a lot of histories happened between 2012, when this whole thing happened, and 2020, when they were awarded the Nobel Prize for their discoveries. A lot of things happened with people finding out how to do it with human DNA, because Doudna and Charpentier had only figured out how to do it in bacteria. But they did acknowledge the fact that it could be used to edit human DNA. But they were biochemists, right? They didn't really know a lot about cellular biology. But eventually they figured it out. Am I making sense? I feel like I'm not making sense.
So what is the point of CRISPR?
To edit human DNA, that's the point.
Okay, great. So that was like genetic engineering, like the major events of genetic engineering in the 21st century. So I actually did more research on like the late 20th century and the early 21st century. So like
CRISPR is basically the past 10 years is what CRISPR has been focused on. But quickly,
Yeah.
I just want to say that I did a very bad job of explaining CRISPR. I'm sorry for the background noise. But if you want to know more information, I recommend reading the book The Code Breaker by Walter Isaacson. And also there's a wonderful podcast called Big Biology that has an episode on interviewing the author, Walter Isaacson. So you can listen to that and read the book and research online, so because I did a terrible job of explaining to you, but you should just research it on your own because it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Imagine having an author on your podcast.
Oh gosh. Oh my, imagine.
Okay, but like turning time back to the late 20th century in the 1980s. So like the 1970s was more of like everything, the 1970s and everything before it, to my understanding, is just like laying the foundation for like real world applications of genetic engineering. And then in the 1980s, it was when many genetic experiments actually turned into real world products and ideas. Like in 1981, there was the first transgenic animal, and that means it was an animal where it has a gene from a foreign organism purposely inserted into its genome. The animal created was it was a mouse who had the gene of a rabbit inserted into it, and like back then it was pretty unheard of, but today creating transgenic animals for scientific experiments is pretty common, so that's cool. And then in 1982, there was the first genetically engineered drug approved for selling to human consumers, and the drug was insulin for treating diabetes. And before this genetically engineered insulin, people who needed insulin had to get it from like animals producing insulin, and then they would like harvest it. But this was a pretty unsustainable way of obtaining insulin, because in 1978, according to this article, a single pound of insulin required 8,000 pounds of pancreas glands from 23,500 animals. So like, you can imagine how that got very out of hand, as there's a relative. The demand for insulin is definitely not low. So we needed this synthetically created insulin. So that's what was created in 1982, and this discovery was significant because it was a defining point in history for approving genetically engineered drugs for humans. And then I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people today, but probably like a couple of years ago, like genetic engineering was probably more associated with the food industry, like genetically modified organisms. Like that's a pretty common term. Well, the first GMO crop was created in 1988. Well, I don't think it was created in 1988. It officially appeared on the US market in 1988, and this crop was BT corn, which it was corn that had genes inserted from this bacterium called Bacillus thuringiensis. For short, it's BT. That's why it's BT corn. And this inserted gene allowed the corn to ward off pests, which increased crop yields, which is great. So I think, and the GMO market took off. Do you have anything you want to say, Macaron?
No, I mean, GMOs are interesting. There's a lot of controversy over GMOs, but that's like another topic. So I'd rather not say my view on GMOs right now.
Oh, I think people are more cautious about like genetically engineered things in like everyday human life, because like if it's for medical purposes, I think that's more understandable why you would want to use it, but I think people might be more wary of eating like genetically modified stuff on a daily basis. And I think maybe that's why it's like so common these days for like products to advertise themselves as like free of GMOs. So like we're so great. We don't have genetically modified organisms. But I think some definitions of genetically modified doesn't only mean like inserting genes or like editing the genome like directly using like lab techniques, but some definitions also include like selective breeding as genetic engineering. So like if you think about it that way, then like I feel like literally all of the food you eat is genetically engineered. That's a little irrelevant. But in night, I feel, but another very famous moment in the history of genetic engineering is the cloning of Dolly the sheep in 1996. She
I
was,
love Dolly. Dolly's amazing.
yeah, Dolly the sheep was basically grown from an egg cell in a Scottish blackface sheep, but she wasn't grown in the traditional sense of like an egg cell meets a sperm cell and boom, fertilization. No, her genes were cloned from the mammary gland of a 6-year-old Finn Dorset sheep. So like she already got that like full set of DNA, and then she was like placed into this other sheep to like, provide that womb environment for her to grow. Dolly the sheep was perhaps the biggest and most publicized scientific discoveries of all time. But like today, most people today don't really think about cloning anymore.
It was really big at the time. People were like, oh my God, this is going to get so out of hand. People are going to make clones of themselves. Everything's going to go so bad. I mean, it's a fair concern. But now it's more just like, oh my God, we're going to have CRISPR babies. I'm sorry, I'm a giant fan. But yeah, now like I think it's interesting to see the discussion changing to, oh my God, people are going to clone themselves, to, oh my God, people are going to make their own babies. Like, design your baby. People are getting concerned of build a baby, not build a bear anymore. There's going to be build a baby clinics. That's like a whole nother topic, like just kind of discuss the ethics of it. I think we should make another comment down below if you want to hear us talk about the ethics of gene editing, like actual ethics. Right now it's just history, but
yeah, we're trying hard not to talk about the ethics. We're staying with the facts, the hard dates and facts.
Data, yeah.
But like, if you were to apply cloning technology today, I think maybe you could use it to save like species of animals that are like going extinct. I just clone a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And
again, ethics portion is gonna.
yeah. Okay, but the last date that I have before CRISPR discovery is 2010, where the world's first synthetic life form was created, which is pretty cool. Basically, synthetic life form means that they made some cells that were controlled by synthetic chromosomes, and chromosomes are the things that contain your DNA, which contain your genes. So, and then in 2012, CRISPR happened, and if you forgot what's going on with CRISPR, then go back in time in the segment where we covered it earlier.
Yeah.
So, well, we hope you now have a lot more knowledge about the history of genetic engineering. I'm sure there's a lot more dates and achievements that we didn't cover. So, sure, interested, I'd encourage you to go look for more information yourself. But for now,
Definitely.
let's move on to the productivity corner. Today,
Yeah.
we're gonna be talking about different ways to format and use planners. And,
Yeah, planners are
I'm-
amazing.
Yes,
Wait.
they're very amazing. I was gonna clarify that we're gonna be mostly talking about work planners because it's like the productivity segment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think like there are many different types of planners, right? There are online planners, bullet journals, or like normal journals too. Pre-made journals that you can buy at like Staples, of like calendars and stuff. And then there's of course Epic Notion, which is another topic. But I think first of all, it's mainly your personal choice. Let's say that before we discuss our own views and what types of planners that we like to use. But it's mainly very personal. You have to experiment a little bit with which ones you're most comfortable with. Me personally, I find pre-made planners can be sometimes very restrictive, but if you find one that suits you, that's awesome. You don't have to go through the work of bullet journals and like trying to design your own, which is also quite fun. And it's very fun because it's sometimes a very therapeutic and relaxing activity to just design your own planner. So that's a plus of like designing your own. But and online planners are just great just for schedules. And they can also have, if you're not as artistic, they're really great for people who aren't very good at artsy stuff because you have a lot of options pre-made for you. You don't have to go surf YouTube for bullet journal tutorials. Much experience with that, by the way. Yeah, what do you think?
I think every planner obviously has its own benefits and drawbacks. And I think if you're trying to figure out what kind of planner you want, I think another thing to consider other than like bullet journal versus a pre-made one is whether you want a daily or like a weekly or monthly view.
Oh yeah.
Because and that depends on what you're using the planner for. Like dailies, the daily planners, if you get like a pre-made daily planner, they usually have like a lot of space for a single day, and they often have a lot of like very detailed sections for you to put stuff. And if you don't really like that sort of highly organized, highly structured format, then daily planners might be too restricting for you. But daily planners, they let you write a lot of like random details of your life. Like in weekly planners, there usually isn't that much space for you to write like every single task in your day because you're trying to put usually 7 days of a week on 2 pages. So if you more like a general view of your life, then go with weekly or monthly planners. But if you're using your planner to like plan every like hour of your life or track things,
It's really
then
nice to design your own, in my opinion, for those.
oh yeah. Or
So
if
you
you're
can
just really prone to forgetting a lot of things and you really need all of those details written down for you, then daily planners is the way to go. But weekly planners are good for things like reminders and appointments where you don't really have to write a lot because you obviously don't have that much space. And it's also helpful for keeping yourself on top of what's going to come in like the following days. But a daily planner might like suck you in too deep into the little details of your day, and it might be easier to lose track of like the bigger picture and what's actually important. So I think that's like a drawback of a daily planner. I think the weekly planner has a nice balance between having a good overview, but also you can write some quite a few things. But obviously it depends on what kind of work you're doing. Like if you have more long-term projects that stretch over several days, then probably a weekly planner is better. But if you have like lots of assignments, like in school or something, that are getting assigned on a daily basis, and like you can't really predict that, then daily planners are a good thing to go with.
Yeah, and also, if you really are just trying to plan events in your life, like, oh, this day I have this class or something like that, I find it way more useful to just actually have a physical calendar, like the one that you can flip over for every month and keep it on your desk or your kitchen or whatever, wherever you go to very often. So you can just take a look at that, because often if you have monthly planners, you forget to look in it in the first place. Because daily planners, you'll easily make a habit of going in there and looking like, okay, this is my to-do list for today. I have to do these things. But if it's monthly, you kind of forget every month to actually look in there every day and just check if you have something to do that day. And then you'll just kind of brush it off like, oh, I know I have nothing like really important. I know I don't have a class today. But if you get into that habit of not checking your monthly calendar in the first place, you'll like actually getting it out of your shelf, opening it. Like it doesn't seem like that much when you think about it, but it does get kind of tedious and annoying. So for monthly calendars, I really just recommend just keeping that physical calendar on your desk or kitchen or whatever.
Yeah, so you can like glance at it every once in a while.
Definitely.
A different factor of planners is like making your planner to-do list based or schedule based, because I think those are very different like modes to plan in. Because like some pre-made planners, like they might give you like a huge box with like check boxes, and it's just like a space for your to-do list. Or it might be like they might have like times on the side of the page, and it will be and you'll probably be using that to track like appointments or what you need to do. And I think to-do lists are good if you're prone to forgetting what you need to do. Like if if you know that you're supposed to be at this place at X time, but you don't really know why or like what you're here for, or like what you're supposed to do after school or whatever, or like keeping track of all of your assignments. If you have trouble with those kind of things, then a to-do list is good. But scheduling is good for like keeping you accountable of actually doing those things. Because like if you plan to do something, you're more likely to do it. And scheduling also helps you keep your tasks realistic. Like how much can you realistically get done in a day? Like how many meetings or appointments can you realistically have
It
today?
makes you aware of your time, because you can be like, sometimes I remember when I first started scheduling, I kind of put these blocks one after the other, after the other, after the other, not even accounting for actually moving to one task to another, not even giving myself a 5-minute break between two activities. Things that if you just do, if you're going through a to-do list, you often kind of postpone it to the very end of the day. And so yeah, scheduling keeps you accountable that way. But it's really interesting. It makes you very aware of your time in a day.
Yeah, and the whole point of planning is to like keep yourself on top of your time, so you don't like miss out on things or forget to do things. And I think the best system is to like use scheduling to complement to-do lists or vice versa. Because sometimes if you just do to-do lists, it's easy to like postpone them, like you said, or schedule too many and then not have enough time in the day. Or if you just do scheduling, then you might have trouble thinking of what you want to do today or this week. Or oh yeah, to-do lists also have like the whole weekly versus daily thing. But that's sort of another topic. And what we said about weekly versus daily planners also sort of applies to to-do lists. Like if you make a weekly to-do list, that's more gonna be for bigger tasks, and it's gonna give you like a bigger picture of what you have to do. But daily to-do lists are gonna help you record all the little details, like going to the grocery store at 4 instead of 4:30 or something like that. But so back to like balancing to-do lists and scheduling. I think using them to complement each other is the best way to go, because you know what you're doing and you know when you're gonna do it. So boom, all that's left is you doing it.
Yeah. I feel like this thing's getting way too long. We've been talking about this for like 10 minutes.
Wait, for real? Okay, this is the last thing. Don't click away on me. This is paper versus online planners. Do you want to say something about this, Macaron?
Yes, I think paper versus online planners. It's quite okay. So paper gives you a lot of freedom, but I think for people who aren't that artsy, first of all, do take a shot at paper journals, even if you don't think you're artsy. I mean, it definitely does not work for everyone for various reasons. But I think paper journals give you so much freedom and putting your own personal style into something. And just the whole process of designing a page, even though it's maybe not making the to-do list itself, it's just making the page pretty. It's generally, for me, sometimes it can be quite a relaxing activity, but it is kind of hard to hold up for me. Like putting in that much time every week. Some weeks I may not have time and I'm like, oh, look at this. One week my page looks so pretty. Like one day it looks so pretty and the other day it's just like pencil and blah. Like this blah. Yeah, it's really bad. So online, the pro with online journals for me is that it takes much less time to organize things unless you're an expert Notion planner and you make your Notion extravagant. I just use Notion templates because it's easy and pretty. So yeah, online is mostly easier. The majority of the time it's easier, and you don't waste paper. You know, sometimes you make a lot of mistakes in bullet journals, experience with that. But yeah, online environmental benefits plus easier for non-artsy people, plus like it's accessible to you if you go to another place. Sometimes you leave your journal like at home when you go to school or work, you know. Sometimes you can't take it everywhere, but it's nice sometimes having an app on your phone, plus on your computer, plus on your iPad, plus everywhere, you know.
A problem that I sort of have with online planners sometimes is like the notifications. Like at first, it seemed like a good idea. Like I used Google Calendar for scheduling, and at first I put like notifications, but after a while it just got so annoying. Like I would be in the middle of doing something and then it'd be like, ding, hello, you gotta do something else now. And I'm just like,
Oh, I
yeah,
turn those
no.
off. I don't recommend notifications. I think sometimes you really do need to be a little bit flexible with your schedule. So just don't turn on notifications. You'll regret it for the rest of your life. And it's so hard to figure out how to turn it off. Like,
Yeah, I think the thing with planners is that you shouldn't let the planners dictate your life. You should be using the planners as a tool to
Keep you accountable.
keep you accountable and get what you want to get done in life. And so you should really choose one that really works for you. And I hope we gave you some decent information on what kind of planner format you should try.
Yeah.
That was the quietest yeah ever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now on to the most anticipated part of our podcast. Oh, and please let us know that down in the comment section if you're bored of the omitted debate concept, Anyway, today's topic continues our history theme of this episode by posing the question, what is your favorite historical time period? Me, I am very simple. I just like the modern age because there's so many problems to other ages. I just like tech, I like how fast we're going. I love that every year there's something incredible happening. I love that. I don't want something incredible to be happening every 50 years. I'm good. No, please no. So I like this era, I like iPhones. I like Spotify. So
Yeah, I also chose a modern decade. I chose the 2010s, specifically the early 2010s.
I feel like our age just loves
You-
that era. Because
Cause
I
you
remember I was beautiful. I remember like in the back seat of the car, just listening to like Wake Me Up by Avicii and being like, this is life, This is
think,
this
oh
is
my
like
god, we have the exact same experience. And I chose the 2010s. I feel like my reason is even simpler than yours. It's just because it had good music.
that's exactly what I was thinking. I feel like okay, the thing is the difference between we can go on about music, but I'm just saying, I have to say that music at that time period, it wasn't very deep. I mean, just listen to the lyrics of Call Me Maybe and Friday. Like no, like there's really dumb lyrics. But I think that's what you liked about it. You like very fun songs. I think the early 2010s really suits your music style. But I think that for music especially, I felt like songs today are very different. Either the lyrics are very, very deep, at least in Western music, the songs are very, very deep, or they're very, very sexual. Like, yeah. So sometimes they're in between, but less and less songs are in between. But the simplest era, I feel like it suited our age specifically. I think the music that came out in that time period was very, very like it's not very historical, but it's our life. Okay, who cares? I think I think we were in the early 2010s. We were 6 or 7-ish, 5, 6, 7. So that music suited our brains. Like, yeah, call me maybe, Yeah, wake me up. Yeah.
It was like fun and it wasn't too deep and it was like, yay, party.
Yeah. I think these days, I think it's really for preference because I prefer the deep songs. Like, I know that even if I guess like for age groups, yeah, I think that's what was nice. I mean, I wouldn't personally, if I was a teenager in that time period, I would not have liked the songs then. I would have been like, just give me something that's relatable. Call Me Maybe it was not relatable. But now I feel like more songs that are coming up that are more relatable, I think. But or at least sometimes, yeah, I think we can go on about songs. Let's go back to the time period.
Oh, well, well, now that I think about it, I also like the 2010s, like you said, because like technology was getting good and it's like very consistent and it keeps on getting better. And also like you were saying how all the other not ages, time periods all sort of had a lot of like fundamental problems. Like, in the Middle Ages, like just
Yeah.
having like a cavity could kill you or whatever. And like
Yeah, we had now like healthcare. The modern ages, I mean, just like for the past few hundred years, like we've just been slowly, like exponentially accelerating, right? It just kept slowly until like getting super, super like faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. It just kept accelerating, you know?
yeah, it's sort of like the human population, like it grows exponentially.
Yeah, everything's been growing exponentially lately, you know? That's what I love
It's a
about this time
great
period.
it's a great time to be alive. And like I think we sort of interpreted this question as like what's your favorite time period to live in? Because like I obviously wanted to choose a time period where humans existed. Like I don't really want to deal with the prehistoric animals.
Yeah, I mean, like history is kind of defined as the start. Like prehistory versus history. History is like vaguely like kind of described as when writing started, like when humans started developing written language, and then there was like the early Bronze Age and the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and like all of that. So I feel like just as in, I think looking at from a different perspective, like which time period do you find the most interesting to learn about? And I think for me, it is still the modern ages because so much has happened. So much has happened in the past few hundred years. And but I think other than that, I think it's really interesting to hear about the rises and falls of empires in the
Yeah,
medieval times, especially. I think it's fun to learn about that. Yeah, I forgot the exact age it is, but I think it's
I
like
just I just really like the memes, the history memes. Okay, well, that concludes today's episode.
let us know what your favorite time period is down in the comment section below. I love saying that. But yeah, if you have any suggestions for any future discussions, also tell us. We would love to hear your suggestions and we might include them. So shout out.
Yeah, and if you want the randomest health tip ever, don't drink cold soup because it gives you stomach aches.
Yes. We also hope that our podcast does not give you any bodily aches. But until our relentless ranting comes to an end, have a good life.